The sky was an ominous shade of gray as Alex's bus rolled into the small, desolate town. He disembarked and looked around, the unsettling stillness of the place immediately putting him on edge. Alex was a university student, traveling alone during the semester break, searching for inspiration for his thesis on urban legends and haunted places. He trudged down the cobblestone streets, his backpack slung over one shoulder, until he spotted the grand yet decrepit facade of the old hotel. The faded sign reading Grand Dominion Hotel swung gently on rusted hinges above the entrance, creaking as the wind blew. With a deep breath, Alex pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The lobby was dimly lit, with an eerie ambiance that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. An antique chandelier swayed slightly overhead, casting dancing shadows across the room. "Welcome," said a frail voice from behind the reception desk. An elderly receptionist, her eyes clouded with what seemed to be both age and fear, regarded Alex with a hesitant smile. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, I do," Alex replied, handing her his booking confirmation. As she processed his check-in, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this place. "Room 404, the receptionist finally said, handing him an old-fashioned key. Her hand trembled slightly as she added, "You're sure you want that room?" Alex frowned, puzzled by the question, but nodded nonetheless. He'd heard stories about haunted rooms and mysterious disappearances, but he'd never expected to encounter anything beyond folklore. The elevator ride to the fourth floor was slow and creaky, each floor passing with an unsettling lurch. When the doors finally opened, Alex found himself in a narrow and dimly lit corridor. The air felt heavier here, colder. He found room 404 at the end of the hallway. The brass numbers on the door looked tarnished, as if untouched for years. Alex fitted the key into the lock, and with a click, it swung open to reveal a typical hotel room with an old-world charm. But something about it felt wrong. As he unpacked, strange whispers began to echo faintly from the walls, barely audible but unmistakably there. Alex dismissed them as a trick of his tired mind after a long journey. But as he settled in for the night, the whispers grew louder, sending a chill down his spine. Little did Alex know, his stay in room 404 would lead him into a web of dark secrets and unimaginable horrors. The whispers were just the beginning. The first night in room 404 was anything but restful. As the clock struck midnight, Alex was stirred awake by the eerie, disembodied whispers that seemed to seep from the very walls. He lay in bed, half asleep, squinting into the darkness, trying to convince himself it was all just a bad dream. The whispers started as faint murmurs but quickly grew louder, almost as if unseen entities were conversing in hushed tones. Alex strained to catch any distinguishable words, but found the whispers were in a language he couldn't comprehend. His heart raced, and cold sweat trickled down his forehead as the air grew heavier around him. Desperate for some semblance of peace, Alex turned on the bedside lamp. The feeble light barely penetrated the oppressive darkness, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. He grabbed his diary and began jotting down his thoughts, hoping to find solace in the familiar act of writing. But the whispers persisted, gnawing at his sanity. Alex rose from the bed and approached the walls, pressing his ear against the cold, damp surface. The voices seemed to intensify, sending shivers down his spine. He stepped back, shaking his head in disbelief. In search of answers, he decided to explore the room more thoroughly. Underneath a loose floorboard, he found an old, tattered diary bound in cracked leather. The cover bore the initials JB in faded gold letters. With trembling hands, Alex opened it and began to read. The diary belonged to a previous guest named John Beckett, who had stayed in room 404 several years prior. Beckett's entries started innocuously enough, descriptions of mundane activities and the quirks of the old hotel. But as Alex read further, the entries became increasingly erratic and disturbing. Beckett wrote about relentless whispering voices, strange apparitions, and a growing sense of dread that threatened to engulf him. He spoke of vivid nightmares and feeling as though unseen eyes were constantly watching him. The final entry was unfinished, trailing off mid-sentence, leaving Alex with a chill that crept up his spine. The discovery of the diary added a new layer of unease. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, and the whispers seemed to grow louder as if reacting to his discovery. He tried to reason with himself. Perhaps it was the power of suggestion, his mind playing tricks on him due to Beckett's haunting words. As dawn approached, the whispers subsided, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. Exhausted and on edge, Alex finally managed to fall into a restless sleep, the diary clutched tightly in his hands. Little did he know, the horrifying events detailed in Beckett's diary were only the beginning of the nightmare that awaited him in room 404. The morning light did little to dispel the eerie feeling that hung over room 404. Alex awoke, clutching the tattered diary of John Beckett. The unsettling words he'd read the previous night echoed in his mind. Determined to uncover the truth behind the whispers, Alex decided to retrace Beckett's steps and search for more clues. He started by examining the room meticulously, hoping to find any other hidden secrets. As he moved the old dresser, a piece of paper fluttered to the floor. It was a brittle, yellowing page torn from Beckett's diary. The hastily scrawled note warned of the malevolent presence in the room and urged whoever found it to leave immediately. Ignoring the ominous message, Alex continued his search. He noticed a loose section of wallpaper near the bed and carefully peeled it back. Behind it, he found a small hidden compartment containing a rusted key and an old photograph. The photo depicted a smiling couple standing in front of the hotel, their eyes gleaming with excitement. But the back of the photo was marked with a sinister message: they never left. Heart pounding, Alex felt a cold draft as whispers started to fill the room once again. The rusted key in his hand felt unusually cold, almost as if it pulsated with dark energy. Determined to find where the key led, Alex combed through the diary for any mentions of hidden doors or locked rooms. One entry, dated a few days before Beckett's disappearance, hinted at a secret passage in the hotel's basement. Beckett had described strange noises and shadowy figures that seemed to beckon him toward the basement. Alex knew he had to investigate, despite the growing sense of dread. Later that afternoon, he made his way to the hotel's basement, an area seldom visited by guests. The air grew colder and heavier as he descended the creaky wooden steps. The dimly lit basement was filled with old furniture and cobweb-covered antiques, creating an atmosphere of thickened suspense. Alex scanned the area, his eyes finally landing on an unassuming wooden door, partially concealed behind a stack of dusty crates. The rusted key fit the lock perfectly, and with a hesitant twist, the door creaked open to reveal a dark, narrow passage. He hesitated briefly, then stepped into the passage, using his phone's flashlight to guide him. The air inside was musty and suffocating, and the walls seemed to close in around him. As he ventured deeper, he came upon a hidden chamber filled with disturbing relics. Ritualistic symbols scrawled on the walls, melted candles, and a makeshift altar. In the center of the chamber lay a journal, different from the diary he'd found. Alex picked it up, flipping through its pages. It detailed the sinister history of the hotel, built on cursed ground and plagued by a history of violence and disappearances. The journal's final entries described a gruesome ritual that took place in room 404, meant to summon a malevolent spirit. A sudden sensation of cold hands clasping his shoulders made Alex spin around in fear, but no one was there. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening, as if the spirits of those who had perished in the room were condemning him for uncovering their secrets. Alex fled the hidden chamber, his heart pounding, desperate to escape the malevolent forces at play. He knew now that room 404 was not just haunted, it was a conduit for dark, sinister energies that thrived on the fear and suffering of its occupants. As he emerged from the basement, gasping for breath, Alex realized he was now inextricably bound to the cursed room and the horrors it harbored. Little did he know the malevolent spirit wouldn't rest until it claimed another victim. The day progressed uneventfully, but Alex's mind was plagued by the horrors he had unearthed in the basement. As night fell, a sense of foreboding loomed over room 404. The whispers that had haunted the previous night grew louder, more insistent, as if demanding his attention. Exhausted but determined, Alex decided to conduct a thorough exploration of the room. He began by sketching a rough map of room 404, marking every peculiar spot he'd encountered. His eyes were drawn to the old, ornate mirror hanging on the wall. Its reflective surface seemed to shimmer unnaturally, distorting his reflection. As he approached the mirror, the air around him grew noticeably colder. Alex's breath fogged the glass as he peered closer, his heart pounding in his chest. Suddenly, a shadowy figure appeared behind him in the reflection. He spun around, but the room was empty. The whispers intensified, filling every corner of the room with an oppressive, echoing cacophony. Desperately trying to maintain his composure, Alex decided to ignore the mirror and focus on Beckett's diary, which had been his only source of guidance so far. He thumbed through the pages, eyes scanning each line for any clues on how to banish the malevolent spirit that haunted room 404. Each entry seemed to contain a puzzle, revealing bits and pieces of the room's horrifying secrets. It grew late, and fatigue gnawed at Alex's senses, producing a faint hum at the edge of his hearing. He decided to rest for a while, but as he lay on the creaky bed, he felt a strange sensation, a gentle tugging at the edges of reality, gradually pulling him into a vivid nightmare. In the nightmare, he found himself standing in the same room, but everything appeared distorted and drenched in a sickly, otherworldly hue. The whispers had transformed into tormented wails, making his ears ache. The temperature dropped dramatically, and his breath came out in white puffs. As he struggled to make sense of his surroundings, the shadowy figure from the mirror materialized before him, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. Alex couldn't move, trapped by an overwhelming sense of dread. The figure reached out with elongated skeletal fingers, touching his cheek with a touch that burned like ice. With a jolt, Alex woke up, drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. The room was silent now, devoid of the unholy whispers. The surface of the mirror had returned to its normal, albeit now slightly more sinister, appearance. Alex clutched the diary, determined to find a way to rid room 404 of its spectral tormentor, determined to put an end to the haunting. Alex decided that the first step was to document his experiences. Pulling out his camera, he began recording a video log, recounting the events he'd experienced since arriving at the hotel. The tangible evidence of his story might help him make sense of the chaotic amalgamation of supernatural occurrences within the room. As he talked into the camera, a flicker of motion caught his eye. Reviewing the footage, Alex was horrified to see the shadowy figure standing behind him, unmoving, the entire time. His hands trembled as he realized the malevolent presence was real, and far more powerful than he had imagined. A plan slowly formed in Alex's mind. He would confront the spirit using the information in Beckett's diary. Each entry held pieces of a puzzle that, when put together, could reveal the means to banish the haunting presence. But he knew it wouldn't be easy. The spirit had claimed many lives before, and it wouldn't surrender without a fight. As the clock struck midnight, the whispers resumed, louder and more sinister than ever. Alex steeled himself for the battle that lay ahead, determined to break free from the haunting grip of room 404. Driven by a combination of fear and determination, Alex decided to explore more of the hotel. Armed with Beckett's diary and his camera, he ventured out of room 404, cautiously stepping into the narrow, dimly lit hallway. Each step echoed ominously, amplifying the already tense atmosphere. As he moved deeper into the corridor, the whispers from room 404 seemed to follow him, growing fainter yet still perceptible. The hotel had an old world charm, but now it felt like a decaying labyrinth. Shadows danced on the walls, and the flickering lights cast eerie shapes that teased his imagination. Alex paused in front of a painting, a portrait of a stern looking man dressed in period attire. The man's eyes seemed to follow him, an unsettling illusion that made Alex's skin crawl. He continued down the hallway, his flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. A door creaked open slightly to his left. Alex hesitated, the sense of dread almost palpable. Summoning his courage, he pushed the door wide open, revealing a large ballroom that must have once been filled with elegance and grandeur, but now seemed frozen in time. The ballroom was dimly lit by a grand chandelier, whose light source flickered sporadically. As Alex moved his torchlight across the space, spectral figures began to materialize. They were ghostly dancers, moving in perfect harmony to an unseen orchestra. Their faces were blurred, features indistinct, but their aura was undeniably ominous. His breath quickened as he realized these apparitions were reliving their final moments. The whispers grew louder, this time accompanied by faint strains of eerie music. The ghostly figures seemed oblivious to Alex's presence, but as he edged closer, one of them, an elegantly dressed woman, abruptly turned to face him. Her eyes were hollow, dark voids that seemed to pierce his soul. Panicked, Alex backed away, exiting the ballroom and continuing down the hallway. He needed answers, and he suspected the clues lay deeper within this twisted maze. His heart pounded in his chest as he made his way to the lower floors, where the darker secrets of the hotel likely resided. On the second floor, he encountered another hallway, lined with more paintings and closed doors. He recalled Beckett's journal entries about the strange occurrences in the hallways. Ghostly figures staring out of the windows, the feeling of being followed, footsteps echoing in the silence. As Alex rounded a corner, he felt a sudden drop in temperature, and the shadows seemed to grow denser, more oppressive. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over him. His flashlight flickered, revealing fleeting glimpses of ghostly figures at the edge of his vision. The whispers grew louder and more incoherent, a maddening cacophony that threatened to shatter his sanity. It was a relentless assault on his senses, blurring the line between reality and the supernatural. Struggling to maintain his grip on reality, Alex reached the end of the hallway, where an old, ornate door stood ajar. Pushing the door open, he found himself in another hidden passage, darker and more foreboding than the one he had discovered earlier. This passage seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, the walls appearing to close in around him. Alex's flashlight flickered and then died, plunging him into darkness. In the pitch black, Alex's other senses heightened. He could hear faint footsteps behind him, growing closer. The air around him grew heavier, colder. A sense of impending doom settled over him as the footsteps stopped just behind him. He spun around, and his eyes met the malevolent gaze of a shadowy figure, now fully materialized. Fighting the urge to flee, Alex stood his ground, clutching Beckett's diary. He knew he was close to uncovering the truth, but the dark entities in the hallway wouldn't let him go easily. He steeled himself for the next part of his harrowing journey, determined to confront the malevolent spirit and survive the terror of room 404. Determined to find the source of the malevolent presence, in room 404, Alex gathered his belongings and ventured once more into the mysterious passage he had discovered earlier. The rusted key he had found in the hidden compartment seemed to pulse with a dark energy, guiding him deeper into the hotel's secrets. The passage was narrow and claustrophobic, with walls covered in damp moss and a musty smell that made it hard to breathe. Using his phone's flashlight to navigate, Alex pressed on, determined to confront whatever horrors lay ahead. After what felt like an eternity, the passage opened into a hidden chamber that took Alex's breath away. The room was filled with eerie artifacts, ritualistic symbols scrawled on the walls, melted candles, and a makeshift altar adorned with ancient, weathered relics. The flickering glow of the candles cast grotesque shadows that danced along the walls. In the center of the chamber stood a massive, ornate door, sealed with thick iron chains. Alex approached the door cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. The diary he'd found indicated that this door was a gateway to the dark rituals performed by the hotel's original owners, rituals meant to summon a malevolent spirit. As he examined the door, his fingers brushing against the cold metal, a wave of dizziness overcame him. The whispers that had plagued him since his arrival in room 404 intensified, growing louder and more insistent. They seemed to be urging him to open the door, to unleash the darkness within. Summoning his courage, Alex used the rusted key to unlock the chains. With a resounding clang, the chains fell away, and the door creaked open, revealing a dark abyss beyond. The air grew colder, and the malevolent presence became almost tangible. As he stepped through the doorway, a sense of overwhelming dread washed over him. The abyss seemed to stretch endlessly, swallowing the light from his flashlight. He felt an unseen force pushing him forward, deeper into the darkness. Suddenly, the floor beneath him gave way, and Alex found himself sliding down a steep, slick passage. He landed in a hidden underground chamber, surrounded by ancient crumbling stone walls. The chamber was filled with eerie relics, including skulls and bones arranged in ceremonial patterns. In the center of the chamber, a large, ornate book lay open on a pedestal. The book's pages were filled with ancient symbols and incantations written in a language Alex couldn't understand. Yet, something compelled him to approach it, despite the growing sense of doom. As he reached out to touch the book, a cold hand clamped down on his shoulder. He spun around to find himself face to face with a spectral figure, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. The figure's touch burned like ice, sending a wave of pain through Alex's body. Desperate to escape, he grabbed the book and fled the chamber, retracing his steps through the passage. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening, as if the spirits of those who had perished in the hotel were urging him to leave. Emerging from the hidden passage, Alex raced back to room 404, his heart pounding. He knew that the book held the key to banishing the malevolent spirit, but the battle was far from over. The spirit's influence was growing stronger, and it wouldn't rest until it had claimed another victim. As Alex pored over the book, trying to decipher its ancient incantations, the malevolent presence in the room grew more palpable. The air grew colder, and the shadows lengthened, as if the room itself was closing in on him. The whispers resumed, louder and more insistent, filling every corner of the room. Alex knew he was running out of time. He had to find a way to banish the spirit before it claimed him as its next victim. With the ancient book in his hands, Alex felt a sense of urgency. He knew that fully understanding the book's contents could be the key to banishing the malevolent spirit. Determined to uncover the history behind the curse on room 404, he began to decipher the incantations and symbols. The book revealed disturbing truths about the hotel's dark past. Built on cursed land, the Grand Dominion Hotel had been the site of numerous disappearances and unexplained deaths since its construction. Room 404, in particular, had a reputation for being haunted by a vengeful spirit. According to the book, the hotel had been constructed by a wealthy occultist named Augustus Thorne in the late 1800s. Thorne was a charismatic yet sinister figure who held secret ceremonies in the hidden chamber Alex had discovered. These rituals were meant to summon and control dark entities, which Thorne believed would grant him immortality and power. As Alex delved deeper into the book, he learned that the most gruesome ritual had taken place in room 404. Thorne had sacrificed innocent lives to bind a malevolent spirit to the hotel, ensuring his own protection and prosperity. The spirit, however, had grown increasingly powerful and vengeful over the years, claiming the lives of those who dared stay in room 404. The book also mentioned a protective charm, a talisman that had been crafted to keep the spirit at bay. This talisman had been hidden somewhere within the hotel, and Alex knew that finding it was his only hope of surviving the ordeal. As he read through the chilling history, he felt the spirit's presence growing stronger. The air in room 404 became thick with tension, and the whispers were now accompanied by guttural growls and anguished wails. Alex knew he had to act quickly. Following the clues in the book, Alex set out to find the protective talisman. He began by exploring the hotel's attic, a dusty, cluttered space filled with forgotten relics. The attic was dimly lit, with shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. The creaking floorboards and the distant sounds of the hotel added to the eerie atmosphere. As he searched through the attic, he came across an old, ornate chest. The lock was broken, and when Alex opened it, he found a small, intricately carved wooden box. Inside the box lay the talisman, a necklace with an amulet shaped like an ancient, twisted serpent. The moment he touched the talisman, a wave of cold energy surged through him. He felt the spirit's rage intensify, as if it realized Alex was close to uncovering its secrets. Clutching the talisman, he knew he now held the power to banish the spirit, but it wouldn't be easy. Returning to room 404, Alex prepared himself for the final confrontation. The spirit's presence was almost tangible, and the room seemed to pulsate with malevolent energy. He could hear the whispers and growls growing louder, as if the spirit was preparing for its own attack. Armed with the talisman and the knowledge from the ancient book, Alex began the incantation to banish the spirit. The room grew colder, and the shadows seemed to writhe and twist around him. The malevolent spirit materialized before him, its eyes burning with hatred and rage. As Alex recited the incantation, the talisman began to glow with an otherworldly light. The spirit screeched in agony, its form flickering and distorting. With each word, the power of the talisman intensified, pushing the spirit back into the abyss from which it came. But the spirit fought back, trying to break free from the binding incantation. Alex could feel its malevolent energy attempting to overwhelm him, seeping into his mind and body. He struggled to maintain his focus, knowing that if he faltered, the spirit would claim his soul. With a final desperate cry, Alex completed the incantation. The spirit let out a bone-chilling scream as it was banished, its form dissipating into the air. The room grew silent, and the oppressive presence lifted, leaving Alex gasping for breath. Exhausted but relieved, Alex knew that the battle was over, but the scars of his encounter would remain with him forever. Room 404 had been cleansed, but the dark history of the Grand Dominion Hotel would never truly be forgotten. The air was still, and the silence that followed the banishment of the spirit was almost deafening. However, the respite was brief. Alex found it increasingly difficult to distinguish between reality and hallucination. Room 404 seemed to twist and warp before his eyes, the walls closing in on him as whispers of Beckett's voice echoed in his ears. Determined to stay grounded, Alex decided to document every bizarre and frightening moment. His video log became a lifeline, a tangible connection to his own sanity. But the strain of confronting the supernatural took its toll, and each recording seemed more fragmented and desperate than the last. One night, while reviewing the footage, Alex noticed something disturbing. In every clip, the shadowy figure loomed closer, its malevolent presence inching towards him, even when he was alone. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was a harbinger of his impending doom. His nights were plagued by vivid nightmares, in which he found himself trapped in the hidden chamber once again. The malevolent spirit's icy touch left phantom burns on his skin, and the whispers grew into an almost deafening chorus of despair. By day, the hotel staff avoided him, their eyes downcast and their silence unnerving. The elderly receptionist, who had initially assigned him room 404, muttered incoherently whenever he tried to talk to her. It was becoming clear that room 404's dark influence had a grip on more than just its occupants. Alex's health deteriorated rapidly. The malevolent spirit's presence seemed to gnaw at his very soul, draining him of energy and willpower. His reflection in the mirror became a gaunt, hollow-eyed figure, a shadow of his former self. He knew he couldn't go on much longer if he didn't find a way to sever the spirit's grip on him. Desperate for answers, Alex returned to Beckett's diary, which had become a grim roadmap of his own descent into madness. In one of the final entries, Beckett had mentioned a ritual to cleanse the room, one that required extreme courage and a near sacrificial resolve. The ritual demanded Alex to confront the spirit head on, a perilous confrontation that many had attempted, but none had survived. The instructions were explicit. He needed to invoke the spirit using the talisman and the ancient book, then trap it in a binding circle drawn with consecrated salt and herbs. Gathering the necessary ingredients was no easy task, but Alex managed to find what he needed in the hotel's hidden storage room. As he prepared for the ritual, the whispers grew louder and more taunting, as if the spirit knew what he was planning and sought to break his resolve. The night of the ritual, room 404 pulsed with an unnerving energy. Shadows danced with a life of their own, and the air grew heavier with each passing moment. Alex carefully drew the binding circle on the floor, his hands shaking with fear and exhaustion. He placed the talisman and the ancient book in the center of the circle, then began reciting the incantation. The room seemed to recoil from the words, and the whispers became an anguished wail. The malevolent spirit materialized before him, more terrifying and twisted than ever before. The spirit lunged at Alex, its skeletal fingers reaching for his throat. He stood his ground, continuing the incantation with unwavering determination. He could feel the burning cold of the spirit's touch, but he pressed on, knowing this was his only chance to break free from the curse. As the incantation reached its climax, the talisman and book began to glow with an otherworldly light. The spirit screeched in agony, thrashing within the binding circle. Alex felt a surge of power as the talisman amplified the banishing spell, forcing the spirit back. With a final desperate cry, he completed the ritual. The spirit's form flickered and disintegrated, banished to the abyss from which it came. The room fell silent once more, the oppressive presence lifted. Alex collapsed to the floor, utterly spent but victorious. The battle had taken its toll. He was physically and mentally drained. But he had survived, and room 404 was cleansed of its malevolent inhabitant. As he lay on the floor, gasping for breath, a sense of bittersweet relief washed over him. He had conquered the malevolent spirit, but the scars of his ordeal would remain forever. With the ritual complete and the malevolent spirit seemingly banished, Alex slumped against the wall of room 404, utterly spent. His body ached, and his mind felt like it was teetering on the brink of collapse. For a moment, he allowed himself to believe that the nightmare was over. But as the silence enveloped him, a cold realization crept in. Something felt unfinished. The air still carried a faint chill of malevolence, and the shadows seemed to mock his sense of victory. The spirit's whispers had ceased, but the room itself felt different, as if it was biding its time, waiting for one final act. Guided by an instinctual dread, Alex revisited Beckett's diary one last time. A passage he had overlooked now caught his eye. Beckett had cryptically mentioned a final confrontation, a test of willpower and courage that would determine the true outcome of the battle. The ritual had weakened the spirit, but it was not yet fully banished. To completely free room 404, Alex had to face the spirit in its true form. With renewed determination, Alex prepared himself for what he hoped would be the final encounter. He clutched the talisman and the ancient book, knowing they were his only line of defense. The room grew colder and darker, despite the dim light of his phone's flashlight. He could feel the spirit's presence growing stronger, as if it was gathering its remaining strength for a final assault. As midnight approached, Alex began the incantation once again. The whispers resumed, louder and more intense than ever before. Shadows twisted and writhed, forming grotesque shapes that danced across the walls. The spirit materialized, its form now even more terrifying and distorted than before. Its eyes burned with a malevolent fury, and its skeletal fingers reached out for him. This time, Alex was ready. He stood his ground, wielding the talisman with confidence. The spirit lunged at him, but the talisman's glow repelled it, creating a barrier of light between them. Alex's voice grew stronger as he recited the incantation, the words infused with a newfound resolve. The spirit screeched in agony, its form flickering and distorting as it fought against the binding spell. The room trembled, and the very walls seemed to pulse with dark energy. Alex knew he had to remain steadfast, or the spirit would overtake him. Summoning every ounce of his willpower, Alex stepped into the binding circle and faced the spirit head on. He chanted the final words of the incantation, his voice ringing out with a clarity that cut through the darkness. The talisman and the ancient book glowed with an intense light, enveloping the spirit in a blinding radiance. The spirit let out a final bone-chilling scream as it was forced back into the abyss. The light grew brighter until it filled the entire room, and then silence. The oppressive presence lifted, and Alex collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. As the light faded, the room returned to its normal state. The shadows were gone, and the cold chill dissipated. The malevolent spirit was banished, and room 404 was finally free from its haunting grasp. Exhausted but victorious, Alex gathered his belongings and left the room. He made his way to the hotel's lobby, where the elderly receptionist greeted him with a knowing look. "You've done it," she whispered, a hint of relief in her voice. Alex nodded, too drained to speak. He knew that he had conquered the malevolent spirit, but the experience had left an indelible mark on his soul. As he stepped out of the hotel, the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, bathing the town in a warm golden light. The town seemed different now, less ominous, as if a dark cloud had been lifted. Alex took one last look at the Grand Dominion Hotel, a sense of closure washing over him. He vowed never to return and to warn others of the dangers within. But he also knew that the story of Room 404 would haunt him forever, a chilling reminder of the horrors he had faced. As Alex stepped out of the Grand Dominion Hotel, the weight of his ordeal began to lift, replaced by a sense of surreal disbelief. The first light of dawn painted the town in soft hues, and the hotel's ominous shadows seemed to shrink away. Alex took a deep breath, feeling the crisp morning air fill his lungs, a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere of Room 404. Making his way to the nearest cafe, he sat down, ordered a strong coffee, and took out a pen and paper. He knew he had to document everything while it was still fresh in his mind. As the steam from his coffee curled up and dissipated, he began to write, recounting the horrors he had faced and the unseen forces he had fought. While he wrote, a curious sense of peace settled over him. He realized that the act of putting his experiences into words was cathartic, a way to purge the lingering fear and anxiety. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that the malevolent spirit had left an indelible mark on his psyche. After finishing his notes, he decided it was time to leave the town and head back to the university. He wanted to distance himself from the haunted memories and return to some semblance of normalcy. As he boarded the bus, he looked back one last time at the now distant Grand Dominion Hotel, its eerie aura still palpable in his mind. The journey back to the university was long and monotonous, giving Alex ample time to reflect on his experiences. He wondered about the lives of those who had encountered the spirit before him, like John Beckett, and hoped that his actions had finally put an end to the curse that plagued Room 404. Upon his return, Alex found it difficult to readjust to the routine of university life. His friends and professors noticed the change in him, the haunted look in his eyes, and the way he seemed lost in thought. He shared his story with a few trusted confidants, but most dismissed it as a vivid overimagination. Determined to move forward, Alex resumed his research on urban legends and haunted places, using his own experiences as a cautionary tale. His thesis, now enriched with first-hand accounts and chilling details, captivated his professors and peers. Yet, despite the acclaim, Alex knew that sharing his story was both a blessing and a curse. Months passed, and Alex gradually fell back into the rhythm of everyday life. He managed to push the memories of Room 404 to the back of his mind, but they never truly went away. The whispers, the shadows, the malevolent spirit all haunted his dreams, reminding him of the darkness he had faced. One evening, while going through old belongings, Alex found the talisman and the ancient book he had used to banish the spirit. He knew they were too dangerous to keep, and so he decided to destroy them to ensure that no one else would ever use them or suffer the same fate. Gathering Beckett's diary, the talisman, and the ancient book, Alex made his way to a remote spot by the sea. As the sun set, casting a fiery glow across the horizon, he built a small pyre and set the items ablaze. The flames consumed the relics, and Alex felt a sense of closure, knowing that the malevolent spirit's hold on room 404 was finally broken. Standing by the fire, Alex made a vow never to speak of room 404 again. He knew that the story would stay with him forever, a haunting memory that would surface in quiet moments and dark dreams. But he also knew that he had faced his fears, conquered the darkness, and emerged stronger for it. As the fire burned low, Alex turned and walked away, feeling the weight of his experiences lifting with each step. The night was calm, the air filled with the soothing sound of waves crashing against the shore. For the first time in a long time, Alex felt a sense of peace, knowing that he had not only survived, but triumphed over the horrors that had awaited him in room 404.